Employers and managers who had to fire someone on their first day. What happened? He started chopping out lines on the dashboard 5 minutes after leaving the shop. When I asked what the frick he thought he was doing, he said, "Don't worry, I'll share." And then he hogged it all for himself. Selfish prick deserved to be fired. Security supervisor at a hospital. At the end of my first day, the girl relieving me comes in 37 minutes late. She didn't know I was going to be there, so she took her time getting there. She promises up and down that the next day she would be there on time. The next day she is no call, no show. She was gainfully unemployed after that. I am a lifeguard and we take 30-minute rotations with 15-minute breaks. My manager has once told me that a guy came in first day and fell asleep on his first rotation, so he was fired. I ran one of those calendar kiosks in my local mall as a second job for holiday money. Hiring was done by a temp agency located across the country, and the people sucked accordingly. 2 days after we opened, I was supposed to have a new guy to train. I got a call from him saying he'd been stabbed on the bus and was in the hospital. I asked him which hospital, and he told me. I have a buddy who worked for the local police department, and I had him make a call for me. No such person in the hospital, and no stabbings on any bus line. I called the number I had for him, and his dad answered. I identified myself and explained that I was letting his son go from the job he had blown off. The dad was very polite, but as he hung up, I heard him screaming at his useless freaking son. I don't understand why he wouldn't make a more believable lie. The most memorable firing I witnessed was this man who got hired as VP of Marketing. He thought the title gave him the right to be late on his first day for an important meeting with our board members, VP and CEO. Though irritating, he was given a pass since he was new and rewarded with a second chance to impress. This proved to be useless, as he was later heard propositioning our new interns for sex in exchange to be in this imaginary marketing campaign that supposedly would come with endless perks and cash. The CEO personally escorted him out and kindly told him to go frick himself. In the most PC way, of course. Worked for a big bookstore chain. Fired this guy who thought it would be funny to cancel a 5-year-old girl's ship-to-home order of Paddington and replace it with the fine art of vaginal fisting. Luckily the employee was a big enough idiot to brag about it. We got the order replaced, and the family was never the wiser. Firing him was actually infuriating, as he didn't see how he did anything wrong. Hired a guy as a mechanic. He owned several of the type of cars our shop specializes in and did well in the interview. However, he quickly proved to have hobbyist level skills. His productivity was slow. I always give new hires work on my own family vehicles or a shop vehicle before allowing them to work on a customer's car. In this case, he was given a front brake job on my stepson's older model. This is a gravy job. 20-30 minutes average. This guy took almost 1/2 hours. Lost a part. Started cross-threading a bolt, over-tightened a bolt till it broke not once but 3 times, and asked too many dumb fuck questions. Finally it was finished. I took it on an extended road test, including on the freeway. There was a scraping noise that wasn't going away. In fact, it started getting worse. Got it back to the shop, lifted it on the hoist to inspect the brakes, and found both the bolts holding on one of the brake calipers were totally loose. Didn't even try to tighten them loose. Only 2 turns or so. If one of them drops out, the caliper rotates out into the wheel and locks it up abruptly without warning, which on the freeway will make the car suddenly swerve to the right and tumble. My stepson was driving 450 miles back to college that night. I called the guy over to see what happened, and he looked like a guilty dog. With as much composure as possible, I explained the above to him and told him I had to let him go. He understood and packed his tools and was gone. The interesting thing was, a week or so later his sister, who had never been there before, dropped off her brand of vehicle we specialize in, and hadn't heard the news about her brother's employment demise. Without skipping a beat, she proceeded to leave her car anyway, dismissing the matter of her brother with, "Not surprising. I can't believe you went a highway without checking it first. Maybe a 30-40 mph deserted road, but certainly not the highway. You're insane for blindly trusting a new hire with critical repairs." Not an employer, but I did an in-house training course with some new hires. First day goes okay. One of them doesn't turn up on the second day, a Friday, or the following Monday. Turns out he had gone to Glastonbury Festival. He was asked to not come back after that. Amazingly, someone did something similar. Didn't turn up for first day of a training course with some fellow new hires. Main problem was they were all flown in from Malaysia to UK. Eventually found out she had some minor surgery scheduled, but didn't want to mention it in case she wasn't hired. Instead decided to keep quiet and just not turn up. Incredibly, it worked and more training, and flights, and hotels were set up for her. She still worked there when I was made redundant to cut costs. Purchased 6 songs on iTunes with the company credit card less than an hour after we issued it to him. There's no way that's a business expense. One woman didn't even make it to the interview. She came to the office and was told to wait in the hallway for the manager to call for her. She promptly started to wander around the office peeking into rooms, people's screens and randomly pick up and examine stuff. She was an RPG protagonist. The fastest turnaround I've ever seen was this guy we hired in support at a tech company. Everyone knew that the structure of our network wasn't ideal, but it worked and we didn't have the resources to fix it. We showed the guy the network diagram and told him this. He immediately declared it unacceptable and marched down to the network manager's office and started listing off all the reasons why the network was wrong. Yep, you don't lecture the king neckbird on the first day, and sure as heck not when you're the lowest level peon in the company. He was politely told to get the frick out less than 4 hours into his first day. King neckbird. LOL'd. I have a story. Although I was the employee at the time, I'd been laid off from a hospital job I'd had for 6 years. Put applications out every. Domino's is the first to call back, so I go for the interview and the manager guy hires me. I tell him though that I need a spot working inside the store and not delivery as my car isn't reliable at the moment. He says no problem. I do the training and it's my first day on the job. I show up and I am told to go on a few deliveries with one of the drivers in their car. Okay. After we deliver a few pizzas, the manager says okay, time for you to head out on your own. I remind him about our discussion about how I can't do deliveries at the moment and he just says, well, drivers are what I need. If you can't do that then I'll have to let you go. Come to find out, my friend's wife worked there and at the time was cheating on him with the manager. She recognized me during training and apparently told him he can't work here. He might find out about us and tell my husband. Please tell me that you told the husband. I was 13 and secured my first job at a pet supply company called Paws. After my first day we were all done cleaning up the store, so we all milked the clock for the last 10 minutes sitting around chatting it up. The topic of my age came up and I told them I was only 13. I didn't know it was illegal at the time and the job required you be 18 to work there because it was a warehouse environment. The next morning I came to work on time and was pulled into the office. I was told I couldn't work there because I was underage. I walked 3 miles home crying like a little bee because I thought I was fired for underperforming. You must have looked very old for your age. I was a supervisor at a local bagel breakfast shop many years ago. We hired a new girl. She knew one of the other employees there who happened to be the manager's son. She spent the whole day flirting with him. I asked her to do a couple of things. She flat out told me no. At first I was incredulous. Asked her a couple of more times, still no. I said, you're fired, go home. I didn't have the authority to fire anyone, but after I told the manager and owner what happened, they upheld it. She was there less than 6 hours. Friend of mine got a job at Chipotle as a cook. Got drunk the night before his first day and was hungover at work the next day. He threw up in the bathroom for most of his first shift. Didn't go back after that, wasn't asked to come back. The only one I felt horrible about, I was training the guy. Didn't do the firing. On his lunch break he was caught walking out 2 rolls of toilet paper to his car. Explained he couldn't afford any right now. A manager took the rolls. Fired him on the spot. It's justifiable. If you'll steal TP you'll steal something else, but dude, I would have let you borrow some cash to get by if you asked. I'm a teacher. I was on a committee to hire a new 5th grade teacher. I was showing her the ropes and monitoring her in class behavior. I watched this bonehead tell a student, I don't like you very much. Figure it out yourself. The next thing I showed her was the door. In the exit interview, on the walk to the door, I demanded an explanation and she said of the student she didn't like, she said he was wearing designer jeans. You know his life is all peaches and cream. Taking from us little guys. I say, did he make an inappropriate comment to you about money? She says, number, but I know they're kind. TL. DR. 30-year-old woman was classist against a 10-year-old. I had an employee who worked for a week. He went to a comedy club, ordered $60 worth of food and booze. When he couldn't pay, he asked if they would charge it to the company he works for, which they declined. The manager of the comedy club called me the next day to talk it over with me. I told him to go pay it that day, since it was payday. He didn't pay them. I fired him the next day. He went to a comedy club, ordered $60 worth of food and booze. I can't believe he only got one beer and a pretzel at the comedy club. Not quite first day, but handful of folks had just started before big company meeting. Long story short, one guy had logged into the customer database in the hotel at the meeting and was skimming people's info as hard as he could, while high out of his mind on M or something. Opened 2 restaurants as a side business 6 years ago. Fired a staff on his first week because whenever I was sitting down eating my lunch, which I paid for, he thought it was classy to sit in front of me and just steal part of my food. But before firing him, I asked his fellow colleagues, and seems he did this regularly with our kitchen supplies and once with a customer he tried to hook up with. I had a small consulting company with 3 other guys. We'd busted our asses for almost 3 years to get a good reputation and expand. We scored a new contract, and we were already at 100%, so we started looking around, and hired someone who had a good reputation and appeared to have the right skills. We briefed the guy on the customer and project, shared documentation, and sent him to the customer site, alone, to start the job. We got a call from the customer at 11 AM. Asking us why the new guy was redesigning the solution we had agreed on. Apparently the new guy didn't even make it to 40 minutes before telling everyone that the design was crap, and that it needed to be redone from the ground up. We called him at noon, asked him to explain himself, then fired him and told him that he'd be paid for the full day if he just packed up and left immediately. New rule, never bring a new hire on site unescorted. After having been trained in part by this woman but mostly by other staff, on my second official day managing a store, I had to fire the woman who had been manager before me for a history of tardiness and missing a shift that day as well, forcing me to run the store alone for 4 hours. In the end it actually helped a lot because most of the employees were very bitter that she had been getting away with that lax behavior for so long, so they liked me from the start and began to work harder. I didn't do the firing, but I saw 2 young ladies get fired their first day at the strip club. Apparently they were unaware that they would have to take off their clothes. I used to be a manager at a Radio Shack. I hired some dude who looked like LL Cool J and was about as old as him too, to a part-time position. He spent his entire first day hitting on female customers, who as a whole, had no interest in him, while hitting on yet another uninterested woman. He turned around and accidentally hit a customer with his McDonald's cup, which should have never been in his hand, and his high C spilled all over the carpet. He then proceeded to argue with the customer that it was his fault and tried to make him clean it up. The customer became irate with him and they got in position to start fist fighting. I fired him right there. He didn't even make it to his first break. We fired a summer intern on his second day, the moment he walked in the door. After his first day of work he started a Devil Wears Prada style blog that night on Blogger and wrote some pretty scathing crap about all of us and posted it that night, using all of our full names. It came up on the Google alerts we set up for our company and product name. We read the blog first thing in the morning before he came in, and fired him right when he came in. He took the blog down before 11 AM. We had a server for a golf club restaurant that was going to be hired because she was articulate and attractive and had experience. But we brought her in for a second interview to basically give her all the paperwork and plan for training. She proceeded to talk about how the US is going to split along the continental divide and it will give rise to 2 governments, and she wanted to make sure she was on right side of the divide. She basically talked herself out of getting hired by talking crazy. We had a teacher have a full breakdown on their first day. Started mumbling and rocking. We had to call the ambulance. Thing was, they had done some CRT work and passed the interview reference check with flying colors. I guess this was the day they finally snapped. That's just really tragic. This happened in the military, so I didn't get to fire him per se. Country I'm from his conscription. So one fine day we get a new enlistee. He's posted to my unit's admin dept as a clerk. Seemed like a decent guy, responsive and asking all the right questions on his first day. Sometime in the afternoon I allowed him to take a break. He goes off to his bunk. Half an hour later I hear loud shouts in the corridor outside my office. New guy apparently had gone ahead to take a nap on a sofa. A sofa in the CO's office. A major who had walked by saw him and was giving him a nice shelling. He was posted out within the hour. A guy's hired to operate radio-controlled crane in a 12 meters high industrial warehouse. On his first day during a break he uses the crane to lift himself up as high as the crane goes and then drive around. And no, he was not wearing any kind of safety harness. I think he had attached himself to the crane hook with his belt. The shift boss saw him dangling from the ceiling playing Superman. He was fired super fast. A new hire posted to her Facebook page that she was starting a new job, but she was just doing it for the health insurance because she was trying to get pregnant. Then she was going to quit. Basically, she was going to work there for 9 months, take paid maternity leave for a couple of months, get the medical expenses paid for, then leave. Boss got wind of this on the first day and fired her. That's very tricky legal territory, but essentially she had lied in her interview saying that she wanted a long career with the company, then admitted online that she was just scamming them for healthcare. She checked her phone approximately every 5 minutes. I told her to put it away after 2 hours of this crap. She did. Then when she thought I wasn't looking, pulled out a second phone. I asked her why she was so obsessed with using her phone in work. She was checking up on her boyfriend in case he cheated while she was at work. So I told her again to put her phone away. She was in work and using phones was against the rules. She continued to keep pulling it out and using it. So I eventually told her to go home and the money for that shift would be in her account at the end of the week, but that she was no longer required. She seemed really shocked. Best thing I saw was the new hire doing a coffee run. Got money from a bunch of people, then just left. Never came back. Got a new trainee apprentice years ago and I showed him the office and his responsibilities. I also asked him about his birthday for the calendar. He, day of national shame. Me, what? He, when we lost the war, the 8th of May, you know what I mean. We never should have surrendered. I shaved my head the week before and he thought that I was a Nazi too, but I'm not. He was fired within 2 hours. Hint, Nazi Germany surrendered the 8th of May. He asked for paid time off the next day to go to another interview. He CC'd my boss too, the CIO. The store manager hired a guy contingent on his background credit check. He had bad credit and the same manager made me fire him. So I told him his checks came back bad. He said that should have been sealed. Turned out that he had a forgery conviction, which was in fact sealed. He laughed when I told him it was just bad credit. 3 or 4 weeks later, just as I was leaving the company, the company dropped the credit check and the store manager, in spite of my warnings, hired the guy again. He passed the check this time. 2 weeks they caught him stealing computers. Went to retrieve the new hire in the cafeteria, asked them to follow me out to the work area. Starting walking towards the door, they start to follow, then see someone they know sitting on the other side of the room. They walk away from me and proceed to have a conversation for 5 minutes. When they were done they came back to me and said they were ready to go. I thanked them for coming in and showed them the door. I work in a tobacco-free workplace and the use of tobacco on the premises means instant termination. We all had to sign papers acknowledging that when we hired on. So some people get around it by walking around the back of the building into the parking lot behind us and technically getting around the no smoking on the premises clause. On his first day working there, a new guy would leave his station and walk to the back of the building or get in his car and drive off the lot to go smoke. Each trip would last him about 20 minutes and he did this every hour. He was told to leave on his second day. Worked retail management. On Black Friday we had a new guy and his one job was to greet customers. Literally hi welcome to two older ladies walked in and he says what the frick is ooh up. I told him your time working here. I clocked him out remotely and told him to enjoy his family because he wouldn't be shopping with the $4 he made working that half hour. I won't lie, that dude said on the first day what I have wanted to say for years doing retail. We would send our new drivers out of town to a corporate 4-day new hire training. We put them up in a hotel next to the corporate office. It was a Marriott residence and that our corporation used all the time. I received call the day he had checked out his room that it had been wiped clean of everything except the TV. Even the pillows and fancy bedding was gone. Blow dryer, clock radio, coffee pot, dishes, etc. gone. They were sending us a $750 bill to replace it all. So I call the guy once he gets back to town to say there's a problem and explain what I've been told and that was unacceptable and he was being let go. He says hang on a minute and he sets phone down. I proceeded to hear him start yelling and then other people start yelling, including an older woman. He comes back on the phone a few minutes later and says his teenage brother accompanied him on the trip and stole everything before he left the room that morning. Our employee didn't know he'd done it. I told him I was sorry, but the decision had already been made to let him go. He could bring me all the stuff and the hotel wouldn't press charges, or he could keep it and the hotel would press charges. He relays that in Spanish to the other people in the room with him and I hear the older woman start yelling again and hitting someone. He lived with his folks. Mama was pretty peed little brother. The whole family met me at our office to give me back everything. The kid looked like Mama had worked him over pretty good. Our employee apologized again and asked if he could keep his job. Told him no. They left. I was just another employee and several years later it still makes me chuckle. Working for a delivery company. One guy on his first day parks van blocking two people's driveways. Got into the back of the van to look for the parcel that needs to be delivered and lets the sliding door close and locks himself in. Doors could only be opened from the outside with a key. He left his phone in the front so he couldn't call for help, and it wasn't until 6 PM when the homeowner blocked from their own driveway comes home from work hears someone crying for help inside this van, that they were able to call the depot for someone to come out with a spare key. He didn't even deliver one parcel that day. He turned up the next morning and was told he wasn't needed anymore. Doors could only be opened from the outside with a key. That just sounds like bad company policy. I mean, this guy wasn't purposely freaking up or anything. He was just the victim of circumstance. In the early 2000s I was at a startup that did video streaming, mainly international television, but also some pornographic material. We hired a guy to do encoding and operational work, and were very specific during the interview about the types of content he'd have to work with. He said he had no problem with it, and took the job. Day 1. After all the paperwork and orientation, some P happened to be first in the queue of video he had to work with. After an hour or so he came to me to say he had a moral problem with P and refused to work on it, so we had to let him go on his first day, for refusing to watch P at work. Towards the end of my time at uni, I worked extra for the English department invigilating exams, basically setting up the exam hall, handing out exams, checking IDs, collecting the exams. They usually hired senior students who had already passed those exams, but on one occasion they decided to use a guy who was studying at a different department. So he and I set everything up and got the exam started, and settled in for the wait. The guy quietly tells me he might take this very class the next semester, and the exam looks pretty easy, so could he sit it now as well? Me, what heck no, but he was insistent. So I told him to step outside and call the department secretary and ask her if he could. Not because either there was a chance she might say yes, but because I needed her to hear this nonsense from his own mouth, and the no from her might shut him up. My cunning plan worked perfectly. He came back all forlorn telling me she said no, and later when I was debriefing with the secretary she told me they would not be using him again. She was as stunned as I was by his lack of sense. TLDR. My co-invigilator wanted to sit the exam he was invigilating. He never invigilated an exam at that department again. Two of the best I can remember. Guy 1 shows up to new hire orientation with a full-sized pillow and a large bag of Doritos. Did not hesitate to use either during the middle of orientation. At the first break he was let go. Second one was discovered to have dined and dashed on the day of his interview. It wasn't discovered until after he was hired, gone through NHO and was beginning his first day. When he was taken by the police officers on property for questioning, he claimed that he paid by credit card. They asked him to provide proof and he said that he couldn't because he didn't have the receipt. He didn't have mobile banking, and their phone lines were closed to do a verification. This was at 1 PM. On a Monday. When they told him that they did not believe him, he said, "Do what you got to do." So he was arrested and fired. Not quite what you were aiming for, but I got someone fired on my first day. Specifically, I was hired in a temporary position to replace an admin being off due to long-term health problems. I get in, I'm set up with access to the admin email account, and the first email I open is from a throwaway email account with a screenshot of the sick admin's Facebook page, talking about her job working in a pub while she was on sick leave from our company. I forwarded it to the manager, who thanked me, then went into her office and spent a while shouting into the phone. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.